Barry said, just a 1-minute intro as to kind of my positionality, or as some would say, my baggage, my personal baggage related to this research, was that yes, my wife and I did in 1999 live and work in Zenica. That was our first love. We have friendships there that have lasted now 20 years. There was a wonderful experience of culture and life and resiliency and story that captured us personally. And my good friend Hassan from Zenica, I was able to host him in my home in Cincinnati. So we have a wonderful connection there. 3 years later, we had an opportunity to come back. And as the true American that I am, my savior complex was strong and in full force, and I was going to the other. I was going to Banja Luka, the capital of the Serb Republic, Republika Srpska, 99% Serbian, Bosnian Serb. And I was there to help the bad guys. I had watched the Hollywood movies in the last 20 years. I knew that 1 out of 3 bad guys in every Hollywood action film is Serbian. I watched CNN, as many Westerners did during the war, listening to Cristiano Amanpour basically equate the Serbian population as evil. So I went into that situation with that perspective. And as we began to learn the language, as we began to spend time with businessmen, mothers, priests, famous musicians, famous radio hosts, politicians, we began to hear this word over and over again, Jasenovac. And as I began to learn more about that, I thought, wow, talk about propaganda. Talk about an extreme rationalization and justification for such horrific bloodshed in the 90s war. They are worse off than I thought. They are more delusional than I thought. And then a person who at first was my main, if you want to call it, enemy, his name is Dusan, he felt that I had come to steal sheep, that I was a wolf, that I was a spy. Any other negative thing you want to say, that's who he thought he was. And one day, I went to Jasenovac with a group of other young people. It was a cleanup day where we went to the grounds. He didn't look at me, didn't want to talk to me. Halfway through the day, he said, "Come here, Scoggins." And we sat, and he did a prayer, because we were in front of a grave of children, a mass grave of children. And that began a relationship. And it began for me an interest in trying to figure out, is this Serbian delusion? Is this Serbian rationalization? Is this the extreme version of victimization that they are going to point to something that is 80 years in history? Me as an American, and as most Westerners, we don't care about history. If we do know about history, at least in the last 20 years, we don't want to know about it, or we brush it aside. Most of my colleagues in Bosnia at the time, when I would talk to them, those who lived in Sarajevo or in other different places, they just thought I was crazy for even bringing up the idea of something that was 80 years in the past. How does that have anything to do with today? And so, for me then, that is my background. That is why I wanted to pursue, is there something to this historical trauma at Jasenovac? Does that have anything to do with today's gridlock? Does that have anything to do with today's lack of political, social, economic sustainability? Why, after 20 years of millions of dollars of investment, the top experts around the world sharing their advice, economic growth opportunities, why is the Office of the High Representative in 2015 say that we have been on a downward spiral here in Bosnia for the last 8 years? How is that happening? Could there be a link to historical trauma? Could there be a link to transgenerational trauma happening on the Serb side? Why did it take 10 years for the Prime Minister of the Republic of Srpska to visit Srebrenica? And who would not come during the actual 20-year celebration. He came a week early. What is going on there? Why hasn't there been this acknowledgement of the victims here at Srebrenica and others? Why hasn't there been proper acknowledgement and proper apology? Why are those things not happening? So that was how my research launched. I did a case study of 15 Bosnian Serbs living in Banja Luka, all in their 30s and 40s, half women, half men. These 15 individuals, you could say, were leaders in their own realms of society, whether it was entertainment, political, religious. So I interviewed a priest all the way to a surgeon, to a famous radio personality, a famous TV host. These are leaders, and I was interested in what do the current Bosnian Serb leaders think about World War II and its connection today. What I basically found out from these case study interviews is there was, on many levels, a deep connection to World War II. And if you're not familiar with what I know Jasenovac has been talked about on day one, Jasenovac was a concentration camp. Bosnian Serbs refer to it as a death camp. But it was a concentration camp in World War II where the Nazis' kind of right arm Ustashi group, made up of mostly Croatians. The U.S. Holocaust Museum has the number, and I know the numbers are controversial, but the U.S. Holocaust Museum has the number at 100,000 victims, mostly Serb, Gypsy, and Jewish victims. This was a concentration camp that did not use bullets. It used knives, it used axes, and that's what happened. Now, the situation that was different, when you compared what happened in Germany and what had happened at Jasenovac, one of my questions is if you think about what happened in Germany in the last 70, 80 years as it relates to official acknowledgement of what happened, official apology, financial restitution, criminal justice, the exact opposite happened from a Bosnian Serb perspective. My interviewees said that when the war ended and Tito became president, that he had a policy called brotherhood and justice, brotherhood and unity. And this policy did not allow Yugoslavians to discuss what happened in World War II. They weren't able to visit the site, and everything was hushed for the sake of unity. Now, he succeeded in creating a pretty amazing Yugoslavia in other ways. In a financial way, the Yugoslavian passport was the strongest passport in the world at the time. They could travel to the east, they could travel to the west. Many people talked about back in the days, if they wanted to have coffee in Paris, they would go to Paris for the weekend. Everybody had a second home. It was a pretty amazing life, and for 50, 60 years, things kept quiet. From a Bosnian Serb perspective, there is a lot of anger because of that cover-up, that there wasn't a proper acknowledgement and apology, proper restitution, proper criminal justice. Things were pushed aside. And 9 out of the 15 interviewees said that if the exact same sequence of events that occurred in Germany with the proper apology, acknowledgement, restitution, if that would have happened here, related to World War II massacres, that they believe the 90s war would not have happened. They believe that the political manipulation that occurred in the 90s war, that fire that the politicians started, when they threw it on the ground, that it wouldn't have taken, there wouldn't have been no fuel for the fire. But because things had been covered up for decades and decades, this transmission of anger and hate and revenge never was able to be processed, never was able to come out. And so when the leader said, let's take revenge, the main theme that the Serbians, the Bosnian Serbs, used in the 90s was never again. Jasenovac, never again. They today are now, from their perception, feeling very stuck. The first area that they feel stuck in is because of their perpetration in the 90s war, the atrocities they committed. They do not have a right to share the atrocities done to them. The international community does not have empathy to hear that story. Particularly when we as an international community are very frustrated by their lack of proper acknowledgement and apology for what they did in the 90s. So they feel stuck in that sense. A second area that they feel stuck in is that their own political leaders are using that victimization platform for political power. They have the public discourse around what happened in World War II within the Republika Srpska has been poisoned. And so for anybody to want to speak out and objectively begin to talk about and acknowledge what happened, everyone just says, oh, that's political talk. Thirdly, for example, at the U.S. Holocaust Museum, there is a display about Jasenovac, and then a few corridors down, there is a display about Prijedor and what happened there. So within the same museum, they are portrayed as the victims and also the perpetrators, which has totally given their legitimacy or a fair, open space to discuss what happened. There's gridlock there. So the majority of the 15 Bosnian Serbs that I interviewed have no hope for any resolution of this in the future. My last story is, it was my first interview, and we sat down together, and he said, in World War II, my father, who was 10 years old, along with 5,500 other Bosnian Serbs from the village, were taken to the top of a mountain by Croatian soldiers. His father, at the time, who was 10 years old, was handcuffed, walking with a soldier, and a Croatian soldier looked down at him and said, "Hey, ti izgledaš kao moj sin. You look like my son." And he took a knife, and he cut the handcuffs, and said, "Run like hell. Don't look back." And that day, 29 people on his mother's side died and 19 on his father's side. And he said that he has two kids. And he said he doesn't have hope for himself or for them or for their kids that this can ever be resolved.